Good afternoon from Atlantic Council Studios here at the IMF headquarters in Washington, D.C. Throughout this week, we have been and continue to cover the 2024 spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank Group. I am Amin Mohseni, macroeconomist at the Geoeconomic Center at the Atlantic Council, where I lead the Bretton Woods 2.0 project. The project focuses on generating new ideas and perspectives on economic and financial multilateralism. As part of our project, we are talking to officials from various MDBs, IFIs, including AIB, as well as finance ministers and central bank governors from around the world. These conversations aim to provide deeper insights into the global economy and particular economies in discussion. Today, I have the incredible honor and privilege of hosting President Jin Liqun, the president of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or otherwise known as AIB. We are delighted to have you here with us today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Jin. If you allow me, I would like to start our conversation with a look on AIB's experience over the past 9 years. In particular, as the youngest member of the MDB community, how has AIB's position in development finance landscape evolved since its inception in 2016? And what are some of the key priorities and sectors of the bank?
Thank you very much. The bank was initiated by the Chinese leader, and the idea is to mobilize the broad-based support for infrastructure development in the 21st century. And this should be a bank built in the 21st century, working for the countries in the 21st century, and be governed by highest possible governance and standards. So as you see, it took us 2 years to reach agreement for the 57 founding members, and then January the 16th, 2016, the bank was up and running. So we have completed 8 years of operation already. We are 9 years into operation. So I think there are quite a lot of things which we can count towards the achievements of this institution. First of all, the bank is set up based on the experience of the existing MDBs, multilateral development banks. You see the IMF and the World Bank were set up more than 75 years ago, and then ADB more than 50 years ago, EBRD. So we have all those sister institutions which offers a huge amount of experience. So the setting up, or I could say the conceptualization of the bank is very much benefited from the experience of those MDBs. On the other hand, we should understand that this bank was set up in the 21st century, and things have changed globally. We are in the AI era. We depend very much on IT technology. And we also understand that the major difference in development between developed countries and developing countries is some gap. You can call it digital gap. You can call it infrastructure gap, or the policy and regulatory gap. So the bank's mandate is to support broad-based economic and social infrastructure, broad-based economic social benefit of the people through investment in other productive sectors. So that's the mandate. But how to achieve this mandate? Certainly, we need to be creative, we need to be innovative. So over the last 8 years, we worked very well with the World Bank Group, with ADB, with EBRD, and as you know, we're now working as a system, try to deal with global challenges. So all in all, as a new kid on the block, we've been working well with the big sisters and brothers.
Yes, indeed. New kid on the block, but doing a lot of work. You alluded to this a little bit in your conversation right now. So you've been working with the World Bank, ADB, EBRD. In particular, in what capacities has AIB been engaging with these institutions, and what your experience has been engaging with these institutions?
You see, I served about 6 years on the board of the World Bank. And also after I returned to China from the World Bank in 1993, a couple of years later, I was the alternate governor for the World Bank. So I never ever had any, I would say, gap in my career with regard to the engagement with the World Bank. But I was on the board. It's different from being in the management.
Yes.
So an opportunity came in 2003 when I was appointed the vice president in ADB. And my portfolio is to look after the Mekong sub-region and the Central Asia members, plus the private sector operations department. So serving on the board and in the management team certainly helped me a lot. Without those experiences, it might be very hard for me to think about some of the, or I can say conceptualization of the bank, working with the other experts. So I had an idea how this bank should be by consulting a lot of people in the development bank institutions. So throughout the whole process, all the major shareholders, particularly China, People's Republic of China, and they give us a lot of support. And we have also people in China, in the Ministry of Finance of China, who had experience working in the World Bank ADB over these years. So with other major shareholders like European countries and also India, local, Indonesia. So we collectively developed an idea how this bank is going to be managed and what's its contribution.
So I hear that AIB is the largest co-financier of World Bank and ADB, I assume, right? Is that something that that's going to continue moving forward, do you think?
You see, earlier on, it was certainly very much important for us to have co-financing with the World Bank ADB because those two institutions and maybe others also want to maintain their influence and their presence in the client countries. But after many years of operation, I think they may reach the ceiling, country ceiling. So our idea is we could have the mutual benefit. You can reduce your funding for a project so that you could stay longer, before hitting the ceiling.
Yes.
And for us, we develop our operations faster. It was win-win, but throughout the whole process, I think what is most important is the two teams work together seamlessly.
Yes.
This enhances the mutual trust between AIB and other development banks, and exchange of ideas with regard to the way the bank is designed, implemented, supervised, monitored, and all this, has told us it's very much important. Moving forward, I think there are still lots of projects for us to co-finance. Major hydropower projects, major infrastructure projects, railways, airports, seaports.
Yes.
Lots of things we can do together. Even though we have substantially improved our in-house capacity, I still think the opportunities for co-financing would be great.
Definitely. I'm going to get back to you on that infrastructure finance very quickly. But you mentioned something about highest standards of governance. So what do you think is the AIB's governance model? Basically, for example, its non-resident board model has shaped its evolution, and what general lessons can this model provide for other MDBs out there?
You see, when the World Bank and IMF were created, it was in the immediately after the Second World War, and the world was very much different from what it is today. In today's world, IT and digital technology could help us talk to each other, have Zoom meetings, or without any
Especially after
difficulty.
the pandemic,
Yeah.
yes.
And it's a lot easier for people to fly over trans-Pacific, transatlantic, for meetings. But in those days, it was not that easy, right? So I think it's understandable that probably a resident board would be of much help. But in the 21st century, I think we have all these facilities. Communication is no longer a problem. So we think probably like any private sector company, the board could be non-resident, and the board should focus on policies and strategies. The specific projects should be approved by the president. So when we design this institution, it is stipulated in the Articles of Agreement that the board could delegate the power of project approval to the president. Now, what's the major difference? The major difference is that we have the clear division of responsibility between the board and the management. Board should focus on policies and strategies, major issues. And step by step, the president would approve most of the projects. But we don't rush. For instance, the first project, the first sector, first project, the first country, okay, should be approved by the board. And later on, it could be approved by the president. And then, what if all these firsts are gone, right?
But after some time, right?
That's right. But I think it should be all right if the management approves all the specific operations, just like any private sector company. Now, the advantage of this is clear accountability. If it's approved by the management should be held accountable. Anything goes wrong, it's the responsibility of the president or the management team as a whole. But if it's approved by the board, the management can go scot-free because, you approve it, right? So I think it makes sense to reconsider the approach, whether the board should approve specific projects. But this has been going on for the last 7 decades, and it's not appropriate for me to comment on the existing institutions' practice. But I think it makes sense for us to try a different kind of an approach. And because the delegation of project approval to the president, and because of the need to have a clear demarcation line between the management and the board in terms of responsibility, we have the accountability framework. And the president is subject to a 360 degrees annual performance assessment. President must be held accountable for any of the issues which happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, back in 1944 as well, there was this discussion about resident board versus non-resident board for Bretton Woods institutions. Eventually, the officials decided to go with the resident board. But as you said, times have changed significantly, and non-resident boards are as effective as the residents. You mentioned private sector a few times, so I'm just going to jump into that. There's a huge investment gap when it comes to infrastructure, basic infrastructure, green infrastructure, energy transition, SDGs, you name it. And these gaps are in tens of trillions of dollars. And without the involvement of the private sector and without mobilizing private sector capital, it would be impossible to bridge this gap. What has AIB has done in order to mobilize private sector capital, and what are some of the initiatives that you can point out? So,
I think this is a big topic.
yes.
MDBs and the political leaders of many countries have been talking about how we can mobilize private sector investment in our developing world so that they can have more resources to deal with climate change mitigation adaptation, and to deal with connectivity problems, to build projects, transportation projects, to build renewable energy, and all kinds of economic activities which are vitally important for the sustained development. So this is an issue. Now, public resources are very much limited. And when it comes to the debt issue, we find some of the low-income countries are highly indebted. And if you don't lend to them, they will be stuck there. There will be no progress, and the people could not move out of poverty. But if you lend to them, unless you do really a very good job, very likely, probably the debt would continue to rise, right? This is a huge problem. So I think instead of putting more pressure on the public balance sheet, we should mobilize private sector to do more. But there are a couple of things we have to take care of. First of all, private sector investors are very sensitive to the enabling environment of doing business. Yes. The ease of doing business is important, the regulatory environment, and the policy predictability.
Yes.
Yeah. Lots of uncertainties.
Yes.
So we think it's important for us to mobilize private sector investors. Now, how should we do it? We have tried to improve the lending instruments to offer more opportunities for private sector to invest. First of all, we are working on a new lending instrument. We call it Public Policy and Budget Lending, PBL. This is not to cut a check, to give certain money to the clients, government. No. This lending, we call it policy or budget support lending, is earmarked for the improving of the macroeconomic environment and the regulatory environment, so that the investors from the private sector would feel comfortable when they come to a particular country to invest.
Yes.
Give you some of the examples.
Sure.
Those invest in renewable energies would find that they have put in all these installations, and then the power grid may refuse to take them because the power supply is intermittent, and you want it, and it's not available. When you don't want it, they say, can I sell this to you? So I think there's some mismatch. And with regard to the way to deal with the climate change, there's also mitigation and adaptation. Adaptation is also very much important. So we want to provide certain financial resources to those low-income countries with low capacity so they can improve the enabling environment for the private sector investors. Now there's one thing which is very much important. Private sector actually create jobs, more jobs for an economy. And particularly, there are lots of jobs could be created for women, thereby empowering women financially and helping them and to improve their own career and paving the path for their children's future, right? So I think private sector is very much important. But then some people are also worried because they think private sector, well, when you talk about it, it seems that they are for profit. Yeah. I don't deny that. But we should understand that in today's world, private sector investors, these companies, also have a social responsibility to look after. That's very much important. Now, when it comes to mobilizing private sector resources, we have done a lot of things. Apart from the new initiative to improve the enabling environment, we also provide lending to the commercial banks. And the money, again, could be on lent for the earmarked operations. Green, clean economy. We also buy bonds which are issued by the institutional investors.
Yes.
We buy their bonds on the condition that they put these resources to do renewable energies or cleaning the environment, things like that. So we call it also capital market development,
Yes.
right? So it's not simply traditional lending. We put money in the equity, we buy the institutional investors' bonds, we develop a capital market relationship. We provide resources to commercial banks with good reputation, to lend to small and medium enterprises. So we are taking a lot of efforts to provide the necessary funding to them.
Interesting. You mentioned institutional investors between sovereign wealth funds, public pension funds, private pension funds. There's about $80 trillion worth of assets under management. It's a huge firepower that can be put into use with their long-term investment horizons that matches many of the larger scale infrastructural projects as well. I know you, AIB, and particularly yourself, as the first and second president of AIB, have been very keen about the need for major reforms, substantial reforms in MDBs. For these MDBs to be fit for purpose and to operate in the 21st century moving forward. Can you please provide some brief overview of some of the initiatives you have taken in this regard? I know, for example, you were in Marrakesh, 10 heads of the MDBs got together, they had great conversations around this issue. Where is that MDB reform process going from your viewpoint?
I think probably the reform agenda vary from institution to institution. Different MDBs have different kind of a mandate, even though there's lots of overlapping, and they have their different challenges. So I would say it's not one and the same kind of thing for all of the MDBs. But there are some common challenges they need to deal with. First of all, in my view, as you know, we are reviewing the capital adequacy. We call it CAF, Capital Adequacy Framework.
Yes.
And some of the experts are working with this institution to see how the MDBs can maximize the impact of their capital base without going through rounds of general capital increase, which certainly is necessary, but as you know, it might be a little bit difficult for many of the major shareholders to provide fresh money to this institution. So MDB's reform is how, in my view, to make the best of the resources available to them. This is first. Secondly, how the MDBs could improve the complementarity. And we call it, we work as a system, right? Yes. So I think one of the major challenges is how these MDBs could be creative and innovative in responding to the needs of the members in the 21st century, at a time when climate change obviously is the clear and present danger. So lots of discussions have been going on in MDBs. How could they be more effective, more cost effective? How could they be faster in preparing a project? How could they reduce the time of preparation of project from 2 or 3 years or even longer to, let's say, 1 year, without compromising the quality?
It's a huge task.
Yeah.
I might say, and I wish you and other all your other colleagues in other MDBs the very best on that front. So we have a few minutes left. I want to end with this question and some of your top priorities. But so IMF and the World Bank, they are becoming 80 years old this July. And the global community, unfortunately, is facing some of the same challenges that the world was facing back in 1944 when the Bretton Woods institutions first came to existence. So what would your message be to officials and leaders from around the world and different institutions when you're looking 20 years down the road about the key priorities of MDBs and financial institutions, international financial institutions?
That's a very interesting question. Immediately after the World War II, indeed, when Bretton Woods institutions were being discussed, the war is still going on in Europe. But anyway, it's at the end of the war, so things are very much different. The focus certainly is on, in my view, in two areas. How the countries who were sitting together can cooperate and create a world which is safer and better, free from the conflicts. Yes. And I think this is very much important topic for all of them. And how the reconstruction in Europe and in some of these countries could be accelerated by creating the Bretton Woods institutions. Certainly, I think earlier on, you can see immediately the impact of the World Bank and IMF, even though they have different mandates. The world today is different from the 1940s because more and more developing countries are having a stronger voice. And the combined GDP of the developing countries is now more than 50% of global GDP. In the Bretton Woods, in the days when the Bretton Woods were being set up, I think developing countries had a very weak voice. Basically, if you read the book Battle for Bretton Woods, you'll find basically it's a discussion between UK and United States, right? Keynes and White. So now this is very much different. Developing countries would like to have a better voice, better representation in international forums or organizations. That's the major difference. And the developed countries' experience certainly still kind of feed into the policy formulation of many developing countries. But the development of so many emerging market economies in the starting from, let's say, 60s or 70s, is very much different. How could they develop their economy? How could they mobilize capital through domestic internal contribution and international cooperation? So all those issues, in my view, are very much different. So it's interesting to note that the developing countries should also share their development experience with those who are still in the low income category, right? Perhaps, for instance, the experience of Chinese development and emerging market experience could be more relevant to some of the low-income countries than the development experience of developed countries. Because it's very much different.
Time has changed, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, at the Bretton Woods 2.0 project at the Council, increasing cooperation and coordination among MDBs and IFIs is at the core of our work. Let me end with this very quick question. You have 2 years left in your tenure as the head of the AIB. So what is the one thing you would like to see achieved in the next 2 years of your tenure?
There are still some things unfinished. I am committed to be dealing with. I think over the last 8 years, we worked together with all of the major shareholders, and under the guidance of the board, we have set up a system which turns out to be effective. And as you know, we have the basic principle, a bank being lean, clean, and green.
Yes.
So I think my job is to make sure in the last 2 years to consolidate all of those policies, mechanisms, the management, way of doing business, so that this could be serving as the, let's say, this could be as kind of, pattern. There could be some improvement, some further improvement in some areas, but the fundamental structure of the bank, fundamental concept will remain the same. Yeah. Of course, the bank development in particular must respond to changing times, and must be agile, must be adaptive. But they should do this in a way which will make them do things better,
Yes.
rather than worse.
Yes. Yes. No, we could talk for hours and days on MDBs and reforms and development finance, but we are out of time, unfortunately. Mr. President, thank you for your time. It was a great pleasure having you here. Please follow us on #FutureOfEcon for more of programming in the next 2 days of the Spring 2024 IMF World Bank meetings. Thank you.